My next guest is Maria Ines Plaza Lazo. She's an editor, founder, and publisher. She grew up in Guayaquil, Ecuador, lives and works between the streets of Berlin and the world. She joins us to discuss the latest in her work, notions of belonging to a mother tongue, her inspiration for beginning arts of the working class, and what the future holds in an era marked by urgency and desperation. She joins us from Berlin. So I wanted to just start by asking you how the concept for art of the working class came to be.
I start with an anecdote. I was sitting in the train. I was just a few days in Berlin. I arrived here in the city 3 years ago, and
Okay.
I realized someone was selling a paper. And within this paper, there was really nice stuff and a very beautiful, but also very naive way of reviewing books that are not necessarily known, but kind of nichey. And in these books, you could feel that they were connected through, I guess, a normal interest in. I really have a hard time thinking this is a concept, you know. This is a publication and this is a street newspaper, meaning it's a tool for social aid, self-aid, and self-care. And it's an art publication, an art piece, an art object at the same time. So
Right.
to explain you this, the identity of this object is starting one of these five questions. No, five stories. It's
Okay.
starting five different stories. So it's me sitting in a train, um, looking to this guy that is selling this paper in the metro, and thinking, that's really nice. Why is there no paper in this city that it's in in the languages that the sellers speak? And why isn't there an art magazine that it could also be a street newspaper? And this
And
question,
you
it's
have a history. You have a history in art as well, right? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I had seen some articles by you. Were you an art critic before coming to Berlin?
yes, but I didn't came with this label. I didn't
Okay.
come saying like, "Hello, Berlin. This is me. I'm a critic.
Yeah.
This is a curator. Please hire me." I came here pretty actually disillusioned by the idea of having a very precarious and a very predatory system of labor within the arts, that I honestly was also happy to bump into someone that could offer me a job somewhere else, like in a a roastery, or at a coffee shop, or
Right.
a, a library, an academic research place, whatever. And 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 yeah, so this is basically bumping into someone, into something, and thinking, um, there are so many things to say about the fields of the arts, and
Right.
more specifically of the contemporary art practice, that could be just suggested or associated with all other maladies of the world. So yeah, but your question
So,
was, yeah, I
well,
do,
we can just
I am trained. I am trained as an art historian,
yeah.
and I definitely enjoy writing about art. And I've been doing this for the last 15 years. Yeah, for
And
different
so
medias. Yeah.
you mentioned the maladies of the world and being somehow reflected in contemporary art, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And you speak of the publication as a form of self-aid and self-care.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to go back to the anecdote of you on the train and seeing this publication and recognizing the need somehow for a kind of a language-based paper that has a sort of, I would say, transnationalism to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what did this come to you off the bat? Was that something that you recognized? Because it's something so particular about the publication as well, is that writers write in their own language, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like that's something that's foundational to the publication.
It is. Yeah. I don't know. There are two questions over there. I'd like to say that this is a paper done by expats for expats.
Okay.
Given the fact that the migration background behind the background in their families and the path of trajectories through the world. Uh, Specifically, Alina living a couple of years in London, coming from Graz, and Paul's family coming from Poland, and landing in Düsseldorf, studying abroad, wandering abroad, and me coming from Ecuador and living in Berlin. It's basically a rehearsal of all the languages, of all the terms that we had to learn to navigate the idea
Right.
of cultural work in which we wanted to be active. And you just mentioned the term transnationalism, and that
Right.
is a complex term today. I don't feel like it's appropriate anymore to talk about transnationalism. It's also it's a very neoliberal term, and maybe we just try to name stuff by its name. It's about migration, right? It's about working
Mm.
in a as a stranger. It's about working in the own language and feeling as a foreigner in the own language. So I don't feel like I have a mother tongue anymore. I mean, I speak to you in English. I've been working 8 hours in
Right.
German, and perhaps I'm gonna have one or two, three calls this week with my family in Spanish. But that's
Right.
like the reminiscence of a language that was fostered in a specific cultural class context, and let's say, yeah, it's a very very complex thing to explain. But I don't think I have to, because the paper is saying it for itself, right? You and many other that have approached us with enthusiasm or with hate or with love and care have approached this standard candles that we wanted um to spark on. And these are, yes, the multiplicity of languages, and yes, the multiplicity of the qualities of these languages that are being published. I don't know if you noticed, but it's a very heterogeneous levels of English the usage of the English language. And
Right.
some of the texts are really rough, and some others are really perfectionists, and we want them to come together. And uh, yeah, long story short, I guess this is what integration is could be about, through arts and the melodies of the world. In a nutshell, it's basically what contemporary art practices can reflect. not in a representational mode, but as a practice in itself. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it makes sense. It does lead to another question, though,
Mm-hmm.
which is, do you feel an obligation to your readers to some degree to perhaps pinpoint certain points in text, or maybe find a suitable translation for a text, or something that excites you that maybe might be lost on someone who doesn't read in that language, or
Mm-hmm.
if someone doesn't read Turkish or doesn't read Spanish, you know to some degree there's probably moments and literary moments and ideological moments that are being missed by readers, which, for better or for worse,
Mm-hmm.
it does inform the identity of your publication. At the same time, it empowers the original writers, but the audience is missing something to some degree.
Do you feel like is there something missing?
Well, it's not a personal reflection, I would say, and I think that comes from, as you said, just recognizing the heterogeneous element of publications in general and in our kind of contemporary space.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem to empower the writers writing in their original voice.
Mm-hmm.
But I assume
Yeah,
that this is a conversation that you've had, let's say, like an editorial conversation, at some point in
definitely.
time. Yeah,
Yes. Oof. Yeah, I guess this is the current question that it's in the air about authenticity and how authenticity is recognizable or not. And and I guess I um I can speak for Alina and Paul in that sense that we're pretty serious and yeah, and pretty serious about what we're doing, and we take all in the responsibilities and the risks of people just also getting very frustrated about this paper as this very complex thing that doesn't dare to leave out complexity, to trade it for an idea, a liberal idea of saying everybody should understand what you're writing. And this responsibility is not only towards the readers, it's towards the contributors as well. And it's not only about the people that we invite, it's about the people that feel invited through these readings that we offer,
right,
to join. And that's, I guess, the most rewarding phenomena of having this paper circulating for over 2 years now,
right,
that the feedback basically it's bottom up, and meaning that there's people coming from remote places coming and saying, "Hey, we would like to use your channel and tell something
right,
about a struggle here of a certain minority in India." Or it can be an anecdote of a conversation someone had in Malta with a homeless man who thought he was, or he tried to convince this person that he was a former Italian singer, or that traces collected from the surfaces of building in Tehran could actually build an abecedary, or an archive for a possible language, or that academics in Toronto and in Montreal see that what they are actually writing about, let's see, the abolition of the art worker or the artist as an economic figure, should not only be read within the academy, but outside, this everything is connected by a main idea, and that is that um, the system in which we are working and living has to be changed.
Mm.
And yeah, it sounds pretty universalistic, but that's
It's
basically the main tone of our discussions, of the production and of the paper in itself. And we're happy if we don't have to embody it. And I feel that your questions are coming from exactly those effects that we're trying to reach.
right, and I'm curious if you've had moments of, let's say, even conflict with this kind of universalism that you're talking about.
Oh
When
yes, of course.
let's say, you have, because sometimes these different local domestic issues which people are writing from can be problematic to another sort of cohort or another community, let's say, because and even a universalism that strives, let's say, towards um, creating a sense of voice, an openness and voice,
Hmm.
can still find that, it can still find that the content can be problematic, let's say. And do you feel that the publication can or should or has tried to be, let's say, everything for everyone, in a sense, to to give a space, but that even there, if you've had moments of conflict in some to some degree, or
Well, the conflict is part of what we want to achieve. It's not about only delivering um, a nurturing, a pleasant experience of reflecting on what some might look for or where others might feel mirrored, but others could also feel just not part of what of the spectrum of things that we might be um, talking about. But it's basically
right,
about the interest that we could create. If this
right,
interest, this curiosity, this um, um, let's say, yeah, or even to get it more primitive, this sense of rage or shame that you could feel by reading some of the contributions could be actually turned into a positive thing. Saying, oh, fuck, I don't understand this terminology. What is this? Who is this person? Or what is this
mm,
person referring to? And I guess this is the very first moment in which we try to revive again and again when this moment, the first moment where we all had a first encounter with an idea of culture. And we're saying this because we come from backgrounds that were not as privileged as others, where, art was hanging on the walls or theater tickets were part of the weekend program or etc. Right? Uh, the relation or the approach to the arts was a serendipity, and I guess this is what happens to most of people on Earth. The encounter with um, with culture can be so surprising and can be so changing that um, to have a publication in your hands must mean the same. It's not about purity. It's just about this clash, these moments that uh, can affect the
challenging
reader.
somehow.
Yeah, and that's what we try. And
It
it's not something that we are. I don't believe that arts of the working class is the only one doing this. I believe that we are part of a kaleidoscope of people working. And
Right.
in similar ways. We try just to behave as a newspaper, as a channel of periodicity um, and yeah, awareness. So thematizing not only the field but ourselves over and over again, not as people but as figures, as agents, as art workers.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be something that requires discussion today. This sense of, it seems that many publications and even the traditional ones and emerging ones have maintained this sense of comfort in a kind of echo chamber, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it would seem by what you're saying that you're looking to move beyond a kind of self-reflective audience where it's kind of self-gratifying and perhaps even to generate some sort of discourse, you know, and that would really transform a publication from being a, almost like a propaganda vehicle for something towards some more of a platform of ideas or a platform of exchange to some degree, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it seems necessary in today's
But
world
it's not
because
necessary as for. I don't think it's necessary to see the paper as an attempt to divorce from uh, an original idea of how art can be read or seen or talked about or produced, but just to open up that idea to let other contexts be the one that define within and outside
right,
this project. So these projects that are out there, right? Uh, we're having this conversation in the context of a literature festival, right? And
right,
it's all about this métier and how do we, yeah, how do we enunciate the world through this aesthetics, emotional, social, political tools that we have in our hands, that we were born with, that we can give forward.
I do want to move towards a few more logistical questions at some point because I think it's really interesting just the kind of traction that your paper has had. Actually, you've found, from what I know, you have really good distribution on the ground, and you've really innovated a process, or at least not innovated, but maybe taken part in a process that's also particular to Berlin and Europe, and this kind of hand-to-hand delivery system. But before moving on to that, I do want to remain on this notion of discourse, um, because when you look through the paper, you know, the first issue is called "A City is a Stateless Mind," and the latest one, Euthanasia. And in between, you have issues like "The Death of the Left" and articles like "The Death of the Left" and, you
Mm-hmm.
know, "End of the Metaphysics of the West." You know,
Yes.
there are certain key words and key subjects that really jump out: future-oriented technology systems, how this is going to affect our world, how it affects us already. Ideas like almost like a utopian dystopian parallel that seems to be obviously a place of conflict in the writers' minds, at least, you know.
Mm-hmm.
um, and there seems to be a consensus, and I don't know if this is something that, you know, you would necessarily need to set out, you know, as a sort of ambition to create this sort of consensus, but there seems to be a consensus throughout the work of a almost utopian dystopian parallel of looking at the world through this lens of capitalism, post-capitalism, political social systems, and a kind of disillusionment, let's say, or a removal of identity or personality of the individual. It seems like the writers are striving for a sense of belonging somehow,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps they find it in the act of writing itself. But
I don't know if
do you
there's this.
feel
I don't know if this is more of a longing for orientation or reorientation outside the capitalist bubble, because but the fact that we just we're talking, we're streaming our conversation to listeners around the world, and we're talking about similar interests, and we like to maybe link this to a general struggle, but it's um it's just it feels like in a state of emergency, and
Mm,
rather than anything else, especially in
I see.
2020, of course.
Right, right.
And to define, to be concrete about forms of solidarity and forms of care. There's so much more to say about localities and social political engagement that that could be reflected in the arts, that is still in a way kind of detached. And I don't feel like anything else right now rather than a crisis of democracy worldwide is what keeps us busy. It's also the fact that the arts are so detached from what is happening as ever before. And
Mm,
and art is being rather used as a totem for, I don't know, take for instance the work of Philip Guston, um, and the exhibitions that were canceled because there were imagery that refers to the Ku Klux Klan, and in a way that
mm-hmm.
it's so simplified, and it's people talking about it, not even seeing the images themselves. And this is,
Right,
I guess, this is how we are also relating to the world, and that's what actually creates a lot of
right.
anxiety, with a sentiment that we really need to work and live and dream every day. And I don't know how is it for you, but this is something that defines the tone in our issues. So this is
Right.
the headlines are beats. They're beats. They are part of a frequency of accelerationist and speculative ways of how information, thoughts, and ideas are circulating. It's a
Mm-hmm.
meme culture. It's interesting. It's the film director Steve McQueen paraphrasing David Graeber saying, and being quoted by The Guardian in the headline, "The next John Lennon is somewhere in the supermarket, uh, um, filling the shelves." And and
Mm,
it's interesting because what McQueen is doing is basically promoting his new on um, um, struggles of Black people in the UK.
right,
And what David
right.
Graeber was referring to was basically on the problems of bureaucratization and how it can be turned into a positive way, and how um, systemic change can basically create possibilities of people turning themselves into John Lennon's, right? uh, but
Right.
that's a reading that it's so far away from the ideological basis that allows David Graeber to explain the world as he did, and at the same time we cannot avoid um, thinking, or at least I can't, that everything that I read is always, it's now always determined by the velocity and the accumulation of things that are currently just keeping me busy. And it's not only about
Right.
the practice of publishing or editing at all, it's about how just information is literally um, perforating us, penetrating us the way it does. So, to put it in a nice way, I guess, Arts of the Working Class is trying to turn that that fluxus of intensity and give it space, give it air, and let everything coexist in a way that they
Right.
can correlate and yet also create some kind of transparency, right? So it's not only headlines, it's not only contributions, wonderful ones, but also contradictory or very tricky advertisement spots. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the way we finance everything. We have to pay rent and bills at the end of the month, and we do this by selling advertisement. There's no funding. There's nothing but sales of advertisement. That it's also reflecting on how we approach to images and texts nonstop, 24/7, right?
Yeah.
Instagram, social media in general. There, the two stories you're watching. The next one is an ad, right? And it's just
Yeah.
embedded. You don't even question it. You don't click it away.
Which is
You
the
just scroll.
traditional model of publications
Mm,
in a sense. There's really the two models. The pricing the magazine or using the advertising model, which
it's not the
I
same.
guess it really
I
depends on.
guess it's not
Yeah.
as invasive as it is today because what you see is what the algorithms are telling you to read, right? And
Yeah.
and this is basically what we're just not, we just don't want to, yeah, say, oh, so you like Simon Fujiwara, you like the work of Bushra Khalili, so here's another advertisement. It's like, no, there's something else that would put you in a place of, okay, so what am I really interested in? And then you have an auction from the workers chamber in the Steiermark in Austria is selling bikes, and next to it you have an advertisement by an auction house, a local auction house in Berlin, that is auctioning contemporary art. And you have
Right.
both ads in a double spread. So you have the right clash that you really need to see in order to keep on reading and understanding where you're looking, what are you looking at, and in which context are you suddenly sitting in front of. Yeah.
Right. And so, well, that really kind of leads into what I was thinking of pressing on, which is, I mean, if you've managed to get these advertising spaces filled up, you're also speaking to communities and people, and engaging them in a sense, and having to obviously convince them that it's worth their money to advertise in this publication. And I'm assuming that you're not approaching, Pepsi and Nike and like major corporations to do that. So you do have to. It's another relationship that you're developing on the street, on the ground, in a sense, right? Is these different different social stakeholders to a
Mhm.
degree of a certain tier within society.
Yeah.
And maybe you can say something a little on the kind of distribution rate for your issues, because folklore has it that you really distribute quite a large number of issues, or a number of units per issue, and I think it's really interesting. It's really important for people to get a sense of what is possible when perhaps you strike something at the right moment in time, in the right place, and perhaps also with the right ideological spin on it. If you're willing to give those details out.
Mm-hmm. um, yeah. So right now we publish 35 to 40,000 copies of the paper, and
Right.
this is basically a huge number.
Right.
It's interesting that you say, "Wow, that's a dimension that could actually, you know, give it another it's a specific dimension to the thing that you could tell, well, it works. It works that
Right.
people just go to pickup stations that we have in several spots in the city. They get as many copies as they want, as they need, and they sell it. They keep 100% of the revenues, and then you have a redistribution right there of the cultural capital and the currencies and values that are being handled. Just referring to what you say, like, oh, so it's totally worth it to advertise with arts of the working class because they're reaching so and so forth people, and
Right.
but it's more, I don't know. It's funny that you say this because I'm just stuck there. It's I want this to be more than that and to be embedded in other systems of value and other currencies, and that's maybe an invisible one, and
How so?
have it in yeah, I think it's now how it works. It needs to be more. It needs to be more, not in an accumulative
Mm.
way. It needs to be more in a extrapolating way. um, yeah, but it's yeah, it works well in that sense, I guess. But we want it to be a global street newspaper from the very beginning, meaning
Right.
that it's not enough to be in Berlin or in London. It needs to be somewhere in Bolivia or somewhere else. But it's not as this interesting object. It's more like an interesting but also familiar object, and
Right.
and I guess that's where we're not yet. But it's a place where I want to see the paper going and being held by others, and others taking advantage of this kind of encounters because everybody can do it, right? um, yeah, I guess. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, how would you probably have some ideas of how you would get there, you know? Perhaps maybe you've come across some pilots or you've tested some ideas out.
I guess it depends on the people. It's not.
Yeah.
It's we're a super small team. It's the grade of absurdity of the amount of work is just thanks to our megalomaniac souls, and but I don't know to which extent, yeah, this can be over tomorrow, and this can
Right.
also keep on growing tomorrow, but I cannot even speculate in that sense.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well,
How about you guys with Barakunan?
Barakunan, I think the the process and the mode of creation is much more contained, you know, and that's what we're actually looking forward to is in the near future is beginning to finally reach out and expand our creative process, you know, so launching of a sort of publication and
Hmm.
producing this festival and um, trying to move beyond the necessity to expand our own voice, but actually to reach out and, I would say, yeah, just magnify the voices of others to some degree. Um, it's it's a journey. It's a journey, really, when you launch something and you really don't have a sense of how it's going to fit into the world.
Yes.
And I think that's really what the first couple that's really what the first couple of years are really about, which is, nurturing the child to a degree, for it to learn how
The
to
collective
see and
part. Yeah.
think for itself, and how, and at that point, then you can start to objectively view it from within and from without, and start to imagine, where can this child go to school, where, like, what are this child's interests, what else can be done. And I think, as you were saying, this sense of crisis, especially in 2020, and the crisis that's ongoing in the Middle East and in Lebanon, particularly, and in other places, I think we're fueled by this sense of enduring crisis. And what I've really noticed in a lot of conversations lately has been a sense of enduring injustice. And so
Yeah.
long as injustice seems to have this umbrella effect of just complete and overwhelming totality, um, it's difficult to imagine doing anything else other than responding to it somehow, because maybe that's the only way, really, to uh, negotiate your own survival somehow, self-preservation or collective preservation. And yeah, I guess that's what draws people towards, producing the things they want to produce. And as you were saying, as a self-sacrificial martyrdom of creative process that you and your team have undergone, and others, has to come from a place of, I guess, urgency to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to see it as a pleasant struggle.
Right.
I think I think this is yeah, it's totally addictive to work this way. Well, I guess art and politics make people addictive.
I guess so.
When you're when you're in we're just within it, you just cannot stop. Um
Yeah. Why don't
yeah.
you why don't you leave us with something about, I guess, something that stands out from the experience that has really either completely demoralized your sense of purpose or completely uplifted you to really understanding why you're doing it in the first place. Because I'm sure that a lot of people listening to this have, in the last year at least, questioned, what
Yeah,
what what is it that we're doing?
definitely. You just caught me in a tunnel where there is no left and right, no, there's just going forward, and there's just um there's just this incomparable landscape of potentialities right now worldwide, to have the experience to create create bonding with people like never before, and at the same time struggling with isolation, and the incomparable freedom that we have today to look at institutions and say it's time to change the direction, it's time to change the structures. um it's scary. It's a scary landscape, and there is where the work of art cannot be optional. So I guess this is something that it's just exhausting. I wouldn't call it demoralizing at any point.
Mm-hmm.
It's just exhausting. Um,
Yeah.
and many many things happening in the art field are so empty and preposterously alienating, but there are so many good things, and I guess we're focused on that. There are really good stories out there being waiting to be
Right.
read, and um and these really good stories are sometimes just also very clumsy and are also in between languages, and sometimes they're just not thought until the very end, but they do belong on the same spotlight as perfect, beautiful stories. um I think, I mean, maybe it sounds cheap, um maybe I'm just like too tired.
I should cut you off before
But
you begin to
before I fell asleep.
before you begin to really
Yeah.
demoralize yourself. It doesn't sound cheap. It sounds like the only really mode of response that seems adequate at this time. It's definitely a turbulent time, an urgent time, and obviously there's some sort of inevitable beauty and clumsiness of storytelling and narrative is what keeps so many
Mhm.
people going.
Yeah, and but not into the way, it's there's no need for a slogan, right? There's just a need for new parameters of
Right.
collaboration, and where care can just really turn to something real. And I do believe that a publication like this or encounters like ours have a role to play. And maybe just to finish, there is the series of workshops that we're trying to build, um, around the idea of um, a union that could define the commons for art workers. And these commons are, of course, not only economic, but also emotional, aesthetic, and um, other kinds of currencies with which we're dealing with. And yeah, maybe I just invite you to talk with us in the next round. We're having, and that's at the Academie der Künste der Welt in
Okay.
Cologne. The project is called Union de Refusés, and we're playing with the words and the ideas of the institution on which modernity and postmodernity were built, which is the idea of the
Mm-hmm.
salon and the culture of a salon. And the Salon des Refusés at the beginning of the 19th century was built to define the dissidents, the outcasts, but they were still part of the
Right.
system. And just to understand that by building unions today will mean to have to struggle with the idea or like the reality that we're part of a system that it's
Right.
eating us alive, and at the same time the ideal to change it and the possibility to change it, because it's also carving for it. Yeah, so feel invited in a
Sure.
month. We're there, and we're also in Munich thanks to the invitation of the Lothringer 13. It's a public gallery from the city dedicated to projects like ours and contemporary
That's
art
great.
discourses.
That's great.
Yeah, I'll
Yes,
send you a link.
I'll also be back in Berlin um, in 2 weeks, and with that,
Oh, so you're
right
in
now I'm in
Beirut.
Beirut. Right? Yeah, yeah. It was the
Okay,
1 year
great.
anniversary of an uprising this weekend, and um,
Well,
it was yeah. It's just an
how was it?
well, it's kind of the speed at which things go from kind of present tense immersion to simulacra to folkloric symbolism is just very rapid in today's age. So it was really just a kind of flexing of symbolism and establishment. It really didn't really reflect the energy of what had occurred a year ago, which had really lasted for a few months, and is still kind of erupting in minor forms on the streets. But it's a process, and you can't really look towards an establishment to negate or elevate your sense of presence in revolt or resistance or whatever. So I think that a lot of people were disappointed, but I think that there's something to learn from it, which is that you have to stay the course, because if you've already turned towards symbolism and you haven't really even achieved your most basic goals, then you're being led astray somehow.
Hmm.
But yeah, as you said, there's no left or right, just going forward at this point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe we should come with a paper to Beirut and see how can we
yeah.
serve a cause
I mean,
of
there's
clash and
there's really a need
transparency
for a
for the
kind of
city.
democratic process as well of publication. Um, it would be really interesting. I think it would find a good response.
Yeah, you know where to find us.
Absolutely, absolutely.